Today we'll talk about a three-letter word that we battle in our lives every time. And the thing about this word is that if we ride it and tame it, we win as humans. But if it rides and tames us, we lose. That three-letter word is ego. E-G-O, ego. Today we are going to review a book that I'm sure if you read it very seriously, with all profundity that you have, it can change your perspective of life. At least it can do one thing that I can guarantee, that if you're vain, it can make you humble. Maybe not will, but it can make you humble. And if you're already humble, it can make you humbler. That book is Ego is the Enemy, written by Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday is an American author. To know a little about him, he has been a marketer, an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur. He was 19, and his definition of success is different when I say successful. He was 19 when he dropped out of college, and since then his books have been read and loved and admired the world over. He started as a blogger, but he's now considered as one of the finest thinkers of his generation. And to tell you this thing about him is that he doesn't belong to any regular academic institution, but the fact is that he makes an institution in himself. Before I talk about the book, I was really swept by what Chandra Crawford, an Olympic gold medalist, has said about the book. And I hope you will like it also. That I would like to rip out every page and use them as wallpaper. What a great tribute. Of many few things, very few readers might have paid such a rich tribute to the book as Crawford has. And to tell you honestly, I had the same feeling after reading the book. And to my reading, this is one of the books you should really base your life on. That book is Ego is the Enemy. Ryan starts with a question in what he calls the painful prologue. The question is simple. Who the hell am I to write it? Because when you write, what do you exercise? As George Orwell, the famous British author, he gives us 4 reasons as to why I write. But I'm not going to spell out the 3 because here it's only one reason that is relevant to the subject that we are talking. And one of the reasons that Orwell says that I write is sheer ego. The question that though Ryan Holiday doesn't mention George Orwell in his prologue, but the question that he asks is that who the hell am I to write? I was, Orwell echoed in this question when he says that why I write. So if it was sheer ego in Orwell's case, what is it in Ryan Holiday's case? If he says that ego is an enemy, then why the hell am I, or who the hell am I to write this? This is the question that he starts with. Here the author tells you that the story behind him and how he explored his self. This is how he captures it. Ryan Holiday says that I was trapped so terribly inside my own head that I was a prisoner of my own thoughts. This is not just his story. This is your story. This is my story. This is everyone's story. We are trapped in our heads. We are prisoners of our thoughts. Then to fight that impulse, he does a strange thing. He tattoos a line on his right arm. See the abnormal way of doing it. He tattoos a line on his arm. On his right arm is written, ego is the enemy, and on his left arm is another line. That is, obstacle is the way. That is another book that he has written. He has written the 2 titles of his 2 books and got them tattooed on his 2 arms. It sounds really very crazy, but the author believes that it must remind him every day, every minute, that there is an enemy that he has to fight, and there is an enemy that he has to defeat, and that enemy is ego. So that's the reason why he has tattooed this line on his right arm and the other line on his left arm. He introduces ego as a petulant child, a cranky child who lies inside every person, and just he wants to get his or her way, and he wants to wrestle or grapple with this ego his or her way. Every person. And when a person grows up, this is the ego that sucks him like the law of gravity. Look at the phrase, the comparison, the simile that he uses. Ryan Holiday introduces ego as baggage without which we feel lighter, and which is replaced by what he puts as a rock-hard humility. Normally, rock-hard should have been the adjective used with arrogance, but he uses rock-hard with humility. Sometimes he sounds like one of the all-time great English essayists, G.K. Chesterton. The way Ryan uses ironies and paradoxes and allegories and comparisons and similes, it echoes Chesterton. Like when I read this line that ego is stolen, confidence is earned. This line reminded me of Chesterton's so beautiful commentary on pride and humility in his famous book called Orthodoxy. See the comparison. G.K. Chesterton writes that angels can fly because they can take themselves lightly. See, the lightness takes you high. That's what Chesterton makes us believe. That he is actually thinking about kings who in their heavy gold sink downwards, because pride can't rise to levity or levitation, because he calls pride as a downward drag. Pride pulls you down and humility takes you high. If you're humble, you can fly. If you're arrogant, you can sink. The book has 3 parts. Part 1 is called Aspire. And Ryan Holiday puts a question that when you set your goals, why don't you reach your destination? Of all the factors, when you analyze and fix your responsibility, you finally fix the responsibility to just one culprit, and you nail the culprit. You call that ego. Ryan's source of knowledge is huge, it's vast. He draws energy from literature, from philosophy, from modern business, from sports, from family affairs, from everything that happens under the sun. You know, it's not a typical library book. It's not a typical bibliophile's book where you have the glossary and he takes it from any academic research. He takes it from every source that feeds life. Ryan asks us to think big, but act small. And that is how we reach our goals. He proposes an antidote to ego, and that antidote is called detachment. You know, any narcissist, any self-lover can be infatuated by his own work. I may think that whatever I have done, this is the best work that can ever be produced. That is what narcissist did. He was seeing his own image, and finally when he pined away and dropped dead into it, he still thought that he's the best face that nature has ever produced. But it takes what Ryan calls as raw talent to detach yourself. This book teaches you not to hone your talent, but to save your talent from getting consumed by arrogance and hubris. Because he believes that what consumes, what swallows, what kills your talent is not you, but your ego, your hubris. There's a question that may strike you while you read the book, that if you're not naturally humble, should you thrust an artificial sense of humility on you? No. That's what Ryan calls as the sham of insincere self-deprecation. He quotes a line from a biographer that it's poise, not pose. You have to be humble, you don't have to pose to be humble. That has to be inbred in your character, in your make. so that you don't have to look artificially humble. I would suggest that you be naturally arrogant than artificially humble, because that is fake, that is pretentious, that snatches that original make that you have been actually created from. So the thing is not to impose an artificial modesty when you think you are not modest. That is why it takes cultivation till it appears natural, or till it is natural. Rian suggests a measure. Don't talk. That's a measure. Here the author differentiates mere words from real deeds. It's much easier to talk about writing, but it's very, very difficult to commit the act of writing. Just talking about writing and just doing the writing and see the difference. Even a child can gossip about any creative art, but the real test is, as they say, when the rubber meets the road. All of those who write, they'll be painfully conscious of this fact that doing a book is really, really different, is painstakingly different from talking about a book. So Ryan Holiday explores the depth of silence and builds a case in its favor against the spoken word. Well, you may say that if we are silent every time, then who will speak? If we are silent every time, then who will write? You may say that when he sides with silence, but he himself speaks. He builds a case in favor of the silence, but he himself writes. That means he breaks the silence. Actually, silence here doesn't mean dumbness. And talk never means a well thought out and a well spoken out expression. Ryan pits a meaningless chatter, just a prattle, just a senseless prattle, against a profound silence. Silence is contemplation. Silence is focus. Silence is not just the absence of speech. Silence has been the asset for philosophers. As poet of the East, Iqbal craves for a silence against which even speech sacrifices itself. In his own words, inimitable words. ऐसा सुकूत जिस पर तकरीर भी फिदा हो. That is the silence. And the silence that a poet says in a line, that a man's best treasure is his thrifty tongue. Because when we unleash our tongue, it spits out words that we do not actually require. And Ryan Holiday captures the reality in 3 words. Talk depletes us. Just think about this. When we talk more, when we express more, when we demand more, that makes us very, very superficial and very, very shallow in our expression. Well, I am doing the paradox at the same time. I am talking about the profundity of silence, but through words. But this is the real paradox that we as human beings have to understand, that how do we side with silence when we talk? That is why he says that you suffer, you experience a sense of depletion in it. So control that depletion. You get the impression as if the only way to succeed is not to talk. But that is not the point. The point is to overcome one's temptation to overpower others by your talk. I just want to talk more because I don't want you to talk. That is why it's tough to resist talking. See the words. Ryan Holiday says, plug the hole, that one right in the middle of your face that can drain you of your vital life force. Watch what happens. Watch how much better you get. The point is, while plugging the hole, it may render us mute, which is not needed, but it may bring down the level of noise we produce in the name of self-declared, self-proclaimed, self-thought wisdom. Then he poses a question before us. What do we want? To be or to do? That's a clash between action and words. Do we want stars on our shoulders that show how important we are? Or do we want the real accomplishments? The point is, appearances are deceptive. Having authority is not the same as being in authority. Just see the point. So Ryan Holiday stresses on the do part and ignore the be part of it. Doing is all, not being is all. He says that ego actually presents a very false picture before you. You know why? Because it rejects what matters and it replaces it what doesn't matter. This is the biggest disservice that ego does to you. And you can nail that enemy, you can fix that enemy and see wherever it can be really controlled, it will not deprive you of the real capital, of the real wealth that you actually have. The second part of the book is success. Here he talks about how a sudden rise can have a sudden fall, or in his own words, how a precipitous rise can follow by a calamitous fall. And that has happened in many cases. Ryan Holiday gives the examples of some businessmen, some sports personalities, some very, very successful human beings in their lives who really hit it in the first instance. They were called egomaniacs. They thought that they've had it all. They thought that the point they have reached, the climax they have reached, the thing that they have achieved, nobody can snatch that thing from them. But then something happens and they are flat out dashed on the ground. He comments on how success intoxicates and how to be sober and not let the hangover of success kill the joy of success. Because this is the job that success does. Once you succeed, once you land something, once you achieve something, it directly goes to your head. It's like a wine. It is so heady. All you need is to control. Because, I lose my sense, I lose my head once I achieve success. Then Ryan Holiday proposes some lessons. An everlasting lesson is always stay a student. The best lesson we can practice, that all your life you have to be a student. No matter how high you go, no matter how many people you teach, how great your thinking is considered to be, but all your life be a student. And what a way to describe it. Ryan Holiday says a true student is like a sponge, absorbing what goes on and around him. Just see the sponge. It doesn't let anything go. It sucks everything. Ego gives us a wicked feedback, a very monstrous, a very ugly, in fact an unrealistic feedback. And as genuine students, we have to learn to differentiate between the real feedback and the fake feedback. And when Ryan suggests us, don't be passionate, he doesn't mean that we have to drive out passion. He himself is so passionate in his writings, and passion is an asset that we have to nourish in ourselves. And without passion, neither can we study, nor can we read, nor can we think, and nor can we do anything. Passion defines us. But when he says don't be passionate, he means that don't be an overzealous, enthusiastic, crazy, pursuer of something, that ultimately when you achieve something, you think that your craze and your overzealousness, in a way, instead of giving you something, has snatched something out of you. To him, it's not overzealousness, it's patience that creates things for us. And then he draws an allegory. That's a very beautiful allegory. He asks us to be a canvas for other people to paint on you. Now imagine yourself that you're not the painting, you're the canvas. Project yourself as a canvas, and as if there is somebody else with a brush that he paints on you. That means you don't have a choice, you are lifeless. A reader has to be very smart while reading these lessons, because we don't have to be lifeless and dead to things. But all we need to do is that we have to drive that ego out that gives a negative feedback to us. That is what he calls as a crusade against the ego. And that is how hard the crusade against the ego is. Because we don't have to forget, even the tallest mountains have animals that when they stand on it are higher than the mountain. That is what Ryan Holiday uses, the quote in his book, and see the meaning out of it. The author gives you a simple formula, and that formula is not his. He derives that formula from a martial artist who's called Frank Shamrock. And his formula is very simple. That formula is called plus, minus, and equal. Plus, minus, and equal says that this is the formula actually that fighters follow, because fighters have three kinds of people to deal with. If you're a fighter, you have someone better. If you're a fighter, you have someone worse. And if you're a fighter, you have someone as equal as you. Now you are a student. As student, I have somebody who is better than me, I have somebody who is worse than me, and I have somebody who is equal. Now, you prepare your students, or you prepare yourself that how to learn from someone who is better than me, how to teach someone who is worse than me, and how to challenge someone who is as equal as I am. Actually, the author prepares his readers not for some hazy or blurred or philosophically abstract things, but for the things that are practical, that are tangible, that we can see and deal with. And that he says that shun the false crown, keep your identity small. We may be very, very high on education, but we don't have to forget. Here he quotes John Wheeler, the scientist who helped develop hydrogen bomb. But he said something that is even more powerful to my understanding, just more powerful than the bomb itself. What he said is this: as our island of knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance. Because more we know, less we know. That is the thing that this can be paraphrased as. The final part of the book is failure. The book builds up. It's a case. It starts with aspiration, then it comes down to success, and now it has a typical Aristotelian scheme: the beginning, the middle, and the end. And what a way to rephrase failures. Ryan makes failure so entertaining and so natural and so loving that you as a reader sometimes cherish to fail. This is what life does. It takes your plans and dashes them to pieces. That's how he puts, and that's how he captures the real joy of failure. That what do you think? You think you want to be a success, but life has different plans for you. So you have to be prepared for something that's in the offing. He gets you closer to some life situations where sometimes we do everything right, but still, as he say, we are in a deep shit. Nothing falls in place. In the third part, this part, he makes us understand the difference between what he calls as alive time and dead time. And if we are able to understand the difference between these two things, we really are a success. Success lies in understanding the value of time. And of that great American civil rights activist who was called Malcolm X. And about him it was known that Malcolm X converted prison into a university. And unfortunately we do the reverse. When he was put in a prison, he studied everything in the prison, and he wrote in the prison, he contemplated in the prison. And when he was called that, what is your alma mater? He said books. Because he was surrounded, he was besieged by books. All he would think came out of books. All he would give to books. So he converted that prison into an academic institution of learning, of creative thinking. And that is why he says, effort is enough. Because to defeat failure, the author suggests that to defeat failure, you have to change the definition of success. Success to Ryan is a peace of mind which comes through self-satisfaction. And Ryan says that maintain your own scoreboard. I don't have to judge my performance. Of course, I have to get feedback from the people who know. If I write, I will have to get the responses from my readers. That's the positive feedback that helps me grow as a writer. But Ryan he has a suggestion for everybody, whether you're a writer, you're a sports star, you're a filmmaker, whichever the profession you belong to, that he says, maintain your own scoreboard. Don't match your performance with others. Compare it with others, of course, learn from others, imbibe from others, but don't set a benchmark outside you. Make yourself as your own standard. Anyone can win, but not everyone is the possible version of themselves. That is the real test, the real challenge that we have to face with ourselves. And another thing, that golden piece of advice that is everlasting, that is imperishable, that's the most enduring value, that if we can practice, we can never fail. That is always love. And why should we be angry at the world? See the quote that he begins his chapter with. That is Euripides saying, the greatest thing that you can think about anger. And why should we be angry at the world as if the world notices? You gnash your teeth at the world as if you think that the world is looking at you. That is why Ryan says that hate is a burden. Love is freedom. Here again, as I earlier also put it, that here again he echoes Chesterton when he says hate is a burden. That's why he says that angels fly, because angels are all about love. And all those arrogant people, they sink downwards because they wear the downward drag of pride. And here also, Ryan Holiday says that hate is a burden. Just shun it, chuck it. Love is freedom, seek it. So if you want to defeat the ego, Ryan Holiday wants to propose a key for you. And what is that key? That key is called love. L-O-V-E. Ryan Holiday ends the book with his epilogue, and he sums up in a very, very charming way. He compares human ego with a kitchen floor, and see the simile. We wipe kitchen floor every day, rather how many times a day? Why? Because we never think that we have wiped it and it has been wiped clean forever. When we wipe it, the dust gathers on it once again. Then we wipe it again, the dust comes again and settles on it. So we have to be always with a wiper in our hand to dust it clean every time the dust gathers on it. Same is the case with ego. Every time, every day, dust gathers here. So we need to have that wiper in our hands. And that wiper is comprised, and that wiper is composed of so many things that we discussed earlier. That dust gathers, and we have to wipe it out every time, every minute, again and again and again. That is the possible thing that we can do, and that precisely is the reason that Ryan Holiday tattoos the words that ego is the enemy. I will not suggest you to tattoo these words on your arms, but I would definitely suggest, and the suggestion is actually taken from the book, that even if you do hundreds and hundreds of successful things, but all we need to remind ourselves of, that ultimately we are humans, and ultimately we are humbler than dust. As an Urdu poet, Mubarak Siddiq, says in these words, "Hazar taqat ho, 100 दलीलें हों, फिर भी लहजे में आजिज़ी हो, अदब की लज्जत, दुआ की खुशबू, बसा के रखना, कमाल ये है." This is the real thing. This is the real art. And this is the real miracle of your character, that if you are humble when you are powerful. That is the thing that Ryan Holiday asks us to do, and that is the thing that we remind ourselves of doing. Thank you very much.